Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today, the top 10 hardcore filmmakers who are more intense than their movies. For a while, it was a cliche to portray screen actors who play tough characters as effete people behind the scenes. But that is certainly not what this video is about. Oh no, in the video today, we're going to look at people who made movies with pulse-pounding, high-octane action, and yet it was still nothing compared to the things that they did in real life. Truth might not necessarily be stranger than fiction, but it can often be more hardcore. The stories might have been related to making a movie, but in the majority of cases, they had nothing to do with any film production. Number 10. Rob Cohen. Rob Cohen was the script reader who led to the production of the 1973 classic The Sting, and the director of The Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, and Dragonheart in the 90s. Yet today, his best-known accomplishment by far is the writing and directing of the first entry to the multi-billion-dollar high-octane, over-the-top series, The Fast and the Furious. But in 1992, he did something that sounds more ridiculous than anything in that entire series. During a rainstorm, Cohen suffered a heart attack. Since he didn't feel there was time for an ambulance in notorious Los Angeles traffic, Cohen drove himself to the hospital. He claimed that the experience was practically out of body for him, but 6 weeks later, he was back directing Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. So far, neither Dwayne Johnson or Vin Diesel's characters in the Fast and the Furious series have been driving themselves while having heart attacks. But you know, the series is running out of ridiculous ideas, so there's certainly still time. Number 9. Clint Eastwood. After years of thrilling audiences in front of the camera as Harry Callahan for 5 movies, Eastwood got to excite and amaze sellout crowds from behind the camera with such films as American Sniper. And this is not mentioning the fact that he did both with his 1992 masterpiece deconstruction of the Western genre, Unforgiven. But none of these films reflected Eastwood's real-life experiences as closely as his biopic of Hudson River hero pilot Chelsea Sullenberger. After the Korean War broke out, Eastwood found himself drafted. He might have felt that he dodged a literal bullet when he got a job as a swimming instructor at Fort Ord in California. For a while, the closest he got to serious danger was when he worked as a bouncer at a local bar for non-commissioned officers. In 1951, he was on a flight home to Seattle. The plane crashed during a storm roughly 2 miles from the shore outside of San Francisco. It was nearly night when the plane crashed, leaving him with such limited visibility in the choppy water that he could hardly see the shore. Even a swimming instructor like Eastwood said that it seemed like he had to swim 50 miles to safety. Number 8. Johnny Weissmuller. Today he's best remembered for playing the first Tarzan audiences can remember any aspect of, thanks to his trademark Call of the Jungle/Yodel in the 1932 film Tarzan the Ape Man. He also starred in a full 11 sequels, even though he himself said of his performing abilities, "The public forgives my acting." Before that, he was a swimmer who'd seemed determined to hog all of the world's records, while also winning a staggering 6 gold medals in the field and 1 bronze medal for water polo. But most significantly of all was when he was just a teenager working on Oak Street Beach in Chicago. One day, a severe boating collision occurred that put dozens of lives in danger. Working with his brother Peter, Weissmuller removed 20 people from Lake Michigan. Unfortunately, 9 people did not survive the accident. Still, saving 11 lives was a greater act of heroism that Tarzan never pulled off. Number 7. Samuel Fuller. From the 1930s to the 1980s, he directed some low-budget but gut-punching films that included The Naked Kiss, Shock Corridor, and The Big Red One. They're all highly influential films about the darker side of human nature in conditions ranging from insane asylums to World War II battlefields. He wasn't just considered a B-movie director, despite his often low budgets. He's been honored by such film institutes as the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. His acolytes include such directors as Steven Spielberg. Before he worked in films, though, at the tender age of 17, Fuller was a crime reporter who visited morgues and covered executions. After Pearl Harbor, Fuller enlisted with the army, bringing his film camera with him from North Africa to Omaha Beach on D-Day to liberated death camps. Among the medals he earned for his service were the Bronze Star and the Silver Star. Still, he didn't glamorize his service in the slightest, saying that he never saw heroic acts in 3 years of military service, and that in his opinion, the average professional soldier is the most anti-war person in the world. Number 6. Lexi Alexander. This writer-director had the honor of being Academy Award nominated for her 2002 short film Johnny Flinton. It was based on a true story of a boxer accused of murdering his pregnant wife. General audiences were first introduced to her through something a bit lower brow, the very violent 2008 comic book film Punisher: Warzone. Like most cult films, it initially completely bombed, but the film eventually found a devoted following, which led her to jobs directing episodes of Arrow and Supergirl. Yet the most interesting story was Alexander's origin. She was a German immigrant who, at 19, had already become a karate and kickboxing world champion. She also taught martial arts to US Marines. In a momentous brush with celebrity, she gained the US citizenship that would make her name through a green card sponsorship by Chuck Norris himself. He also got her into a showbiz career, although she quickly gravitated towards directing instead of being the next female martial arts star. Number 5. Larry Cohen. He's not the most famous name in movies, but his impact is deep and wide. He wrote the script for the Colin Farrell hit Phone Booth. He also wrote and directed the killer baby movie It's Alive, which became one of the most successful and oddest horror films of the 1970s, and in the same decade, one of the biggest hits of the blaxploitation wave, Black Caesar. Early in production for Black Caesar, Cohen and his small crew arrived in Harlem and were confronted by a group of 6 gangsters who had recently shook down a larger Hollywood production. Since Cohen didn't have the money, he hit on a crazily brilliant idea of offering acting jobs to the gangsters that were threatening him. It worked so well that the movie shoot itself had the run of much of the neighborhood, and the gangsters even became local celebrities, even having their faces featured on the movie posters for the movie. Remember, this was 20 years before Get Shorty. Even that wasn't his boldest move ever, though. That would be for his 1977 film The Private Files of J. Edgar Hoover. For a shoot of cars driving up to the Capitol Hill building, Cohen had arranged for a local car club to have 40 vintage cars drive down Pennsylvania Avenue. To block off the street of modern vehicles without permission, he took traffic blockers used for parades and placed them along the ends. When police came by, he simply waved at them, which apparently made them think it was legitimate because, who would have the gall to do such a thing? Number 4. Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx has appeared in many movies. He's played the righteously vengeful title character in Django Unchained, he's played the deeply unsettling villain in Baby Driver, and he's played Ray Charles in Ray. And no matter how cool he was in any of these movies, they all pale with his real-life experiences. Foxx was at Moorpark in California on January the 18th, 2016. That night, Brett Kyle lost control of a truck. He was suspected of driving under the influence. He ditched the vehicle and rolled it several times. A fire started and was spreading quickly. Foxx and an anonymous emergency medical technician were able to enter Kyle's truck and cut the seatbelt that was trapping him. If they'd taken less than a minute longer, by which time emergency services had arrived, the vehicle would have been completely ablaze. Number 3. Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy was a triple threat, a national best-selling author, a hit country musician, and a star in 44 films. Many of those films were westerns, and they include classics of the genre such as The Quiet American. He also did war films, most notably 1958's To Hell and Back. It was significant because it was based on his best-selling book. But despite this, it did not capture the staggering reality of his real accomplishments during World War II, but this was actually by design. The filmmakers simply felt that the true story was too unbelievable. The exploits by which Murphy became the most decorated American soldier of World War II, a title he disliked because he felt it snubbed all the soldiers who deserved more awards but didn't live to be recognized, culminated near Saint-Tropez, France on August the 15th. He was landing as part of Operation Dragoon, the campaign to liberate southern France. Murphy had already demonstrated that he was unusually willing to engage the enemy. This was actually less common than you might think. Only 25% of US soldiers actually engaged in active combat. After seeing his friend Latty Tipton get cut down by a German soldier who'd been feigning surrender, Murphy completely lost his cool, charged, and then killed the German. He then single-handedly attacked and cleared the first machine gun nest, and then several others, using the same machine gun that he'd captured. And that wasn't all. At a battle near Holzwer on January the 25th, 1945, after his company was reduced to 19 men out of 100, he ordered the rest to retreat, climbed aboard a burned-out tank, and then used the machine gun mounted on it to keep the Germans at bay. These antics brought Murphy fame and fortune, but they also took their toll. Murphy suffered from an extreme case of post-traumatic stress disorder and would develop an addiction to sleeping pills until his death in a plane crash in 1971. Number 2. Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry is best known for writing the film Genesis 2 in 1973, which was a story about a scientist who awakens in a world on the brink of apocalypse after hundreds of years in suspended animation. He also wrote and co-produced a less savory film called Pretty Maids All in a Row, which starred Rock Hudson as a murderous football coach. Of course, I'm totally kidding. Roddenberry is most famous for launching the multi-billion-dollar Star Trek franchise, remaining a producer on the film adaptations for decades after the original series ended its 3-season run in 1969. But even that achievement was less of an accomplishment than something he did decades earlier, in 1947 to be precise. Roddenberry was the third officer on Pan Am Flight 121 on June the 18th, along with Anthony Volpe and Jane Bray. Having departed from Calcutta, they were traveling over the Syrian desert when two of the engines failed and then burst into flame. The plane made an emergency landing as the fire spread, and the three crew members had to rush to evacuate their passengers, which included Indian royalty. One was a woman whose seatbelt jammed as she attempted to leave her seat. With no time to spare, Roddenberry was forced to cut through the seatbelt. The heat was so intense that as Roddenberry left the plane, the passenger he was carrying perished. Other passengers were aflame with fires that needed to be smothered with pillows. Roddenberry had to send two Englishmen on board to look for a Syrian military base that they had flown over before the crash, and thankfully a Syrian search plane found them before the elements could claim the passengers. In total, Roddenberry and his crewmates saved 22 people. Number 1. Akira Kurosawa. By now you might have noticed that some of the entries in this video have had a sort of melancholy side to them. That's going to be the case with this final entry too. Akira Kurosawa is one of Japan's most acclaimed directors. He's thrilled audiences with films like Seven Samurai from 1954, Yojimbo from 1961, and Hidden Fortress from 1958. But one of the most formative experiences of his life was too intense for any of his movies. In 1923, when he was just 13 years old, he survived an earthquake in Tokyo that killed between 140,000 and 150,000 people. Naturally, when they came upon an area strewn with dead bodies, animal and human, Akira wanted to look away. However, he was accompanied by his older brother, who forbade him to avert his eyes from the hideous sight. In words fit for an epic, he told Akira, "If you shut your eyes to a frightening sight, you end up being frightened. If you look at everything head on, there's nothing to be afraid of." Both critics and Kurosawa himself believe that this harrowing situation was one of the formative events in shaping who he would become as an artist. The aftermath of the earthquake was something that he chose never to portray in any of his movies. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please do subscribe to this channel for brand new videos every day of the week. Also, I've got another channel. It's called Biographics. It's biographies of notable people from the present day as well as history, from Elon Musk to Osama bin Laden. You can check it out through the icon on the screen now. But if you want to watch something else right now, why not check out another TopTenz video or a Biographics video over there on the right. And as always, thank you for watching.